In more than 2 years of the war against Ukraine, Russia has lost almost 16,000 units of military equipment. This is data as of May the 24th from Oryx, a defense analytics and warfare research project.
In particular, the Russian army lost 3,054 tanks, of which 2,047 were destroyed, 156 were damaged, 335 were abandoned, and 516 were captured. Armored combat vehicles are in the second place in terms of losses. 1,348 units. Of these, 949 were destroyed, 35 were damaged, 96 were abandoned, and 268 were captured, according to the Oryx project.
After the intensification of hostilities in the Kharkiv region, Russia is forced to transfer new equipment to the front, and it even used the one that had been presented to the Russians at the parade in Moscow on May the 9th. This was reported by the conflict intelligence team.
In the third year of the full-scale war, with so many losses suffered by the Russian troops, a significant part of the mechanized means that are repairable and more or less technologically corresponding to modern warfare, they were already put into operation and destroyed, and now more and more often the Russian military-industrial complex is returning to restoring the means of, for example, 1950s.
For the second year in a row, Russia will not hold international competitions of military unit army games, 3 informed sources told Izvestia newspaper. These qualifying competitions, which usually take place in the first half of the year, were not organized by the Russian Ministry of Defense this year.
International army games are complex competitions between units of the armed forces of different states. They began to be held in 2015. The last time the competition was held was in the summer of 2022. Representatives from 38 countries took part in them. The most famous and most widespread competition within the Army Games was the Tank Biathlon, in which teams from 22 countries took part in 2022. From an article by the Moscow Times.
Russia has removed from 25 to 40% of its strategic tank reserves from open storage. If its equipment losses in the war against Ukraine remain the same or increase, the country will face a shortage of weapons. This situation may continue for the next few years, according to analysts at the Institute for the Study of War.
These assessments suggest that the Russian military has been largely leveraging vehicles from storage to sustain its war effort, rather than using new production to offset battlefield losses. From a report by the Institute for the Study of War,
Russia compensates up to 90% of its dependence on the import of microelectronics through supplies from China and uses it for the production of tanks, shells and other weapons. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced this at the World Economic Forum.
If China purports on the one hand to want good relations with Europe and other countries, it can't, on the other hand, be fueling what is the biggest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. Antony Blinken, United States Secretary of State, The Washington Post reports.
British Defense Secretary Grant Shapps accused China of preparing or already beginning to supply lethal weapons to Russia that could be used in the war against Ukraine. The authorities of Japan and South Korea have imposed sanctions against individuals, ships and companies providing weapon supplies to Russia from North Korea. South Korea has introduced restrictions against 2 Russian ships used to transport weapons and fuel between Russia and North Korea, the insider reports. Also subject to sanctions were 7 citizens of the DPRK, 5 of whom are allegedly working illegally in Russian IT companies in the Far East, earning foreign currency for the development of the North Korean nuclear program. Reported by Diana Kolesnik, Victoria Smirnova, UATV News.